So quickly, I'm Kelly Schoonmaker. I work at StopWaste. I'm a program manager there. I'm also a landscape architect. And one of the things we're working on this year is helping our member agencies, all the cities in Alameda County, the county itself, implement the new water efficient landscape ordinance. So I'm going to speak from our experience working on that project and what I've kind of gleaned from talking to the cities around Alameda County. And then Michelle, who is the city landscape architect at the city of Hayward, and she's going to tell you what's really happening on the ground. So that will give you the kind of dirty details on what this really takes. So that one gets no, thanks, because that's okay. So first of all, how many of you are familiar with the water efficient landscape ordinance? How many of you knew it was updated in 2015? Okay. How many of you knew that it was actually established in 1999? All right, there's one guy. Okay, so this is the thing. So it was established in 1999, updated in 2010, and with not really enforced too much, except in Hayward, and over this time. So this year is sort of different. And I think one thing you'll notice is every year, obviously it's a water conservation ordinance to conserve water in the urban landscape over time as new development happens. One of the things you'll notice is every time they update it, it's in response to a drought. So everyone panics, and then they're like, oh, there's so many lawns, and then they update the ordinance. But this year they're pretty serious about it. One reason that they're allowed to be serious about it this year and give it more teeth, which we'll talk about in a second, is because there's sort of been a cultural shift. We're in the midst of it, from going from a more East Coast or Midwest or European, Northern European kind of landscape of lawn and foundation planting to something that looks like a real California landscape. You're seeing more native plants being used. You're seeing a lot of lawn conversions happening, a lot of rebates. So because of this sort of shift in the vernacular landscape, they are able to kind of get people to buy, like, there's the market for a different sort of look. So the people aren't necessarily demanding lawns as much. So the timing is good in that way. I don't think they would have been able to do it without people demanding it. Let's see what else we're going to say. Oh, and one of the reasons it's important is, this is why it's important, right? People will not stop moving to our state. They keep coming. I know Oregon complains about us going there, but it's only because everyone keeps coming here. And they don't understand that. I used to live there, so I took a lot of crap for that. So anyway, so there's so many more people coming to California, and there's a drought. So there's less of the water to go around between many people. So we really do need to do something about it. So quickly, the highlights just to get everyone up to speed from the changes from the 2010 ordinance. One of the things I think is not great about the way they updated this ordinance is that a lot of times, like Cal Green, one thing, and the building code, when you update an ordinance, and if you lower a threshold for something, you don't make too many changes to the code, right? Because there's a lot of new people coming in, a lot of new projects, more projects getting reviewed. Wheelo wasn't on a regular review cycle, so one thing, so they did both. They lowered the threshold for new construction to 500 square feet, basically capturing every new landscape project, and they made a bunch of changes. So there's including single-family homes. And yeah, so before the threshold had been higher for single-family homes. Now it's still 500 square feet, so that's sort of a big deal. These people aren't used to hiring a landscape architect, so this is a very new audience. So there's a lot of challenges, and then the educational opportunities that go with those challenges. One thing they did do to try to make it easier for this new audience was, if your project is under 2,500 square feet, provide a simpler cookbook approach, a prescriptive path to compliance. So now there's kind of two pathways to compliance. There's a flexibility, but then there are inconsistencies, and with inconsistencies can come confusion. So what did you do in Hayward about the prescriptive path?
We took that out completely. And well, partly because in Hayward we have flat sites and hillsides. And when single-family homes, whether it's a truck development or single-family homes, when it gets developed as a part of erosion control and grading, we require always historically require landscape architect prepare plans for hillside homes, regardless. And so for them to have all of a sudden choice rather than a single source. And also, who's going to determine who is to take the prescriptive pathway. And so it just leads to a lot more confusion and challenges. And so we actually thought that taking the prescriptive path out was more consistent with what we were already practicing.
That's great. Okay. The other thing I mentioned was teeth, so people are actually enforcing the water efficient landscape ordinance for the first time now. Cities are actually enforcing it. A couple of reasons for that. One is that DWR, the Department of Water Resources, instituted reporting requirements for all the implementing jurisdictions. The first report happened last year, and then how you were going to adopt it, and the first real report is going to be coming next year with how you've been implementing it. And then also it's Title 23. Right? And so, and Michelle and I were talking before this, and maybe you can just repeat what you told me about the Title 23 actually being meaningful to people, so people are actually...
Right, because I think, because the landscape is not really considered health and safety. So oftentimes the landscape requirement has been overlooked or challenged. But as soon as you mentioned it to developers and our design team, that it is Title 23 and it's part of the building code, all of a sudden, all the arguments just drops, and they know they have to comply. So I think state actually, given local jurisdiction, or I should say, it empowered our role and made it easier.
Okay, and then within the ordinance itself, one of the biggest changes that has happened is the water budgets have changed. So it's requiring that projects use even less water. And again, there's flexibility here. They allow more water for use in residential landscape than in non-residential landscape. And this allows for a little bit of lawn, like for kids to play on, and maybe having a pool, a small pool, something like that. Well, depending on how big your site is, right? And we'll talk a little bit about, I don't want to get into too much detail. I almost said into the weeds. I don't want to get into too much detail on evapotranspiration and those sorts of things today. It's more kind of about compliance and that sort of thing. But just so you know, it's a 0.55 evapotranspiration for residential and 0.45 for evapotranspiration adjustment factor for non-residential. So it's not a big difference, but it's significant. And then one thing that we at StopWaste are very excited about is they finally put in a requirement to use compost on all new construction and renovations, all built landscapes, and they increased the mulch requirement to 3 inches. The thing is, this is new for a lot of people. A lot of landscape architects never use compost. They're still using like a planting tab or a nitrified sawdust or whatever. So they don't know where to find it. So at the end, we have some resources, one of which is kind of a list of composted mulch sources that you could provide to your submitters. So so this is more participatory part. How many of you did nothing to adopt the water efficient landscape ordinance? Okay, so how many people adopted an ordinance from cities? Okay. And Portola Valley, right? And you guys you did the Bosco one, right? Is that right?
I believe that's right.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Okay, all right. And then how many of you had an existing landscape ordinance or an existing WILO that you amended with the new requirements? Okay, I'm just curious, I just want to see. And then lastly, of those implementing jurisdictions, is there anyone that's part of a regional implementation, or are you all doing it city by city? Is anyone doing regional? No, okay. Interesting. I'm just kind of curious. They gave cities a lot of options, and so I think that one thing we've found in talking to our member agencies, that it's sort of confusing of people trying to pick the right path that works for them. And so I'm just trying to get a survey of what others have done. Okay. So the reporting requirements. So every implementing jurisdiction is required to report. The first report on how many projects you've done and the square footage and then the types of projects. That's going to be an annual report. The first one also requires more information about your experience implementing and how you're enforcing. So this is straight from the ordinance, and so there you go, which you can find on DWR's website. But the DWR was nice enough to put together a template for reporting, which is really simple for everyone to follow. But depending on your agency, how many projects are coming in, you're going to have to develop your own kind of tracking protocols. And, you know, I know some agencies use Excella. Does anyone in here use Excella? Yeah. And some use Munis. We use Munis. I find it very frustrating. And and so with those in the larger jurisdictions that are using things like Excel, you may be able to customize a tab that can help you track these projects. So at the end of the year, all you have to do is do a summary. Michelle, can you talk about what you do in Hayward for tracking?
Very old-fashioned Excel spreadsheet. And so each project comes in, I basically report project type, total square footage, whether there is a lawn or not, model calculation, and estimated water use. And I also put together a formula so that I could see what percentage of a model estimated water use is actually using. And we haven't actually had a problem with water budget calculation at all. Not calculation itself, but people are actually coming under, and I think highest water use was like 98%, but that was like one and only, and most of the projects stays about average about 60 to 65% of total volume. So it can be done.
So for implementation, what we've kind of gleaned talking to the agencies in Alameda County is of the agencies that are having an okay time implementing and enforcing the water efficient landscape ordinance are the ones that have really good communication between the departments, so that the people in planning that are dealing with conditions of approval are talking to the people in building who may be doing plan check, whether that's planners or building inspectors, landscape architects, or engineers. And then finally, if they do have a field inspection, the building inspectors talking to the landscape architect to get them to come out, or or getting information from them to check on the implementation. In Hayward, you are the city landscape architect, and you span many departments.
Well, I'm housed in the planning department, but I am involved in, well, I review every single project, whether it's a planning project or building permit, code enforcement, or whatever. And so I work with public engineering, and also there are capital improvement projects as well. But all other projects, whether it's a commercial or residential, I coordinate very, very closely on C3 and on site grading as well. And I work very, very closely with development engineer and also with planners influencing site planning, so master planning stage, and working on consolidating C3 bioretention areas and how it shapes into the development and such. And I also do inspections. So I work with building inspectors. It's not something that I develop. It's already the system was already there when I got there. I am the gatekeeper before the building permit could get finalized and a certificate of occupancy could be issued. Every project has to get landscape finalized. So that is probably the greatest tool the city of Hayward has to ensure that landscape design and implementation doesn't get overlooked.
And then, right. And so you have, you may not have the same challenges that some of the cities have, but so the other cities that are not implementing as well, they usually don't have a landscape architect at all on staff. Just how many cities are here at all today? Is there any? Okay, so not that many cities in general. Okay. But I don't think that it's not that common to have a city landscape architect, at least in planning. A lot of cities have them, and maybe in public works or in parks, but not in planning. And then the remaining staff just don't have time to review. So these are sort of the issues that we're hearing are coming up to the barriers to implementation. So the other side of a challenge, right, is an opportunity. And so there are educational opportunities too. So one of them is to educate in-house, and that's kind of one of the things we're starting to do here today. And one of the goals of our project at StopWaste for Alameda County is to kind of provide some training to plan reviewers and other agents of enforcement for the ordinance. And also educate your developers. I think in the previous talk, the question came up about how to overcome barriers to zero net energy and deal with the builders and talk to the builders, educate them, and then, oh, well, we should move upstream, talk to the architects. Well, we also need to talk to the developers, the people planning the projects, so they're aware that this exists and can plan for it in their budget, design team, everything. Okay, so one thing you can do to improve compliance is to make it straightforward for your submitters. The more complete the submittals are when you come in, the less work you'll have to do, and the less work they'll have to do, and everyone will be much happier. And what you can do to do that is introduce the requirements early, like I was saying, with developers, let them know. You guys had a pre-application meeting, is that right?
What City of Hayward does, and I think, because I feel that there are very few in the audience who are from public agency, and the ones who are in public sectors and work in many different cities, what you could suggest to the cities that you work in is, if you don't want to use City of Hayward in specific as an example, then you could say that other cities, and I'll talk about my city, is that we offer a pre-application meeting for free. And it's a free service. Anyone could apply. It could be a renovation project, it could be a single-family home, it could be a developer with large housing projects or commercial projects. And so the applicant brings in a set of plans, and it gets circulated to. It gets submitted to planning department, and planner who is assigned determine who should be reviewed. So the plan gets circulated from fire department to police department to parks district to all inner city, solid waste, source control, of course engineering, planning, and such. And I am always included. So it is a great opportunity for developer. And developer often brings their design team to hear what kinds of compliance that they have to face. And so they are much better equipped. And there was a time, short period of time, that we actually charged, and the application level dropped. And we actually saw the level of submittals dropped as well. So we actually took out the fee, realizing that it actually helps the city to use our time effectively. So, it's been a great educational tool, and that when a city has an opportunity for each applicant of all the updates, and it is not just for landscape, it's for building code updates and such. It's a really, really great tool.
And if you can't do a meeting, right, a lot of people may not have those resources, what you could do is a checklist. And if you cannot do a checklist on your own, Calvo, actually Wes sent this to us, made us aware of this very thorough template for a checklist that Calvo has developed, and it's on their website. You can download it and customize it to your city's requirements. And then, I think, as someone who used to have to submit drawings for stuff like this and comply with codes, I found the most, and even in this project, trying to figure out what everyone's doing for their water efficient landscape ordinance, is finding the requirements. So if it sounds so simple, but make it prominent. I know that in some cities, I had to go through their green building page to another sub-green building page, and then I finally read in the body of a paragraph a text link that said something about landscape, and I clicked there, and that's where I ultimately found, after about 15 minutes, the water efficient landscape requirements, and digging through the code on like a public code website. So if you can make it easier for people to comply and say, put some of your your specific requirements right up front, you're going to get way better submittals. I mean, it's not brain surgery, but you're going to get way better submittals. You're going to have less work to do, and yeah, like I said, people are going to be happier, and it'll be an educational experience. Like we were talking about it doesn't, just because it's required, doesn't mean it has to be a drag. It could be a really good educational opportunity for cities and for professionals. So on the other end, so once you do get the submittals, there's some quick strategies that we've heard from people to enforce them and review them. First of all, if you don't have a Michelle Coup, and it's so sad that not everyone doesn't have a Michelle Coup, because the world would be a much better place, or at least landscape-wise. Is this expertise available in some other way? So here's some of the strategies. You could potentially, I know this sounds crazy, so just bear with me. You could hire someone to do that. And we know that City of Fremont actually did bring on another landscape architect, and that person reviews irrigation, and the other city landscape architect reviews the rest of the plans. So they work together as a team. You can also contract out reviews. Several cities are doing that. And you can also maybe be creative about what you can do with the resources you already have. So City of Pleasanton, for example, that landscape architect is housed in Public Works and not in planning. And it certainly was kind of difficult for that person. It was his initiative to kind of get noticed by the planning, permitting, inspection chain of command. But once they found him, now they include him on everything too. So expertise may be there. That last one's probably unusual, but a contractor seems like that could be certainly something, especially if you don't have too many to review, that might be the way to go. So none of those are going to work for you, right? So you're going to educate people that are looking at plans from the ground. For building officials, like, I can't possibly review this, but you can. I'm here to tell you can. The first thing you can do that anyone can do is there's an easy list. Landscape plan, is there a layout plan, is there a grading plan, irrigation plan? Are those plans there? If they're not there, you know this person has probably not done their job, so send them away. So at this high level, right, there's some stuff you can check for. Does the estimated water use, is it less than the water budget? Palm Springs, which is a lot higher, and it means that you can use a lot more water. So check for that. And irrigation efficiency. Are they using a correct irrigation efficiency? DWR gives them to you. This is what you have to use. And so that's an easy one to just kind of look. Is it this? Yes, it is. And then, are they using the correct water budget adjustment factor? So as I mentioned earlier, for residential construction, it's 0.55. It used to be 0.7. So if it's 0.55, that's great. Question?
Can I ask you a question on that? What about mixed use building?
That's 0.45. That would be mixed use over how many units? I think it depends on the.
I mean, you could use when it's mixed use. Oftentimes, a detail section or the commercial section would be maintained by somebody, another commercial. Will be maintained by somebody else, and probably
That's true.
so.
In that case, you're saying you go with the
Residential, for sure, yeah. In the case that Michelle's talking,
Muted.
I think that is how they want to enforce it. They don't say anything specific if it has to comply with. Mix it, you get it. Right. Also in the water budget calculation, check their math. So Michelle reviews a lot of drawings, and other people I've talked to who reviewed drawings say, oh, I checked the math and there's always mistakes, just arithmetic mistakes. So those are pretty easy to catch too. And then
I think one thing I want to remind you, that it's not new, actually, it's been in place since 2006, is model homes. So whoever is doing tract developments and has a model homes, TWR requires educational sign and a water audit report for 17% of the total units.
And that's kind of at that lower level of that small detail that's important, but it's kind of to find that when Michelle mentioned that earlier, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that requirement. And it reminds me of Van Halen, the band, used to have in their riders when they go on tour, they used to have this clause that said no in the dressing room, you know. Is their document of how to set up the stadium or whatever, it's like that thick, is they look at and they're like, they would check it, ooh, that they kind of read everything. So it's like, what is that too? It's an education. You can find a water on right. Well, I mentioned Ordinance is an irrigation audit, and that's not new. That has been the case, but some jurisdictions are using that in a way to kind of they'll withhold. And lastly, I did mention composted mulch is new to a lot of people. The ordinance comes from, it comes from tree trimmings or pallets. Definitely available in the Bay Area, so you can find a list at lawnandgarden.org. Questions?
Yeah, question. So who can provide soil analysis? A contractor was told it would cost about $750.
Well, I have that's $750. It depends on how large the site is.
So the question is who?
Who can provide it?
Yeah, who can provide the soil analysis?
Well,
the first part of the question.
Soil and Plant Lab, which is now called Waypoint.
Yeah, Waypoint.
Soil
But there are a
control.
number of soil
Many soil
labs.
labs.
It's not, that's just one of them.
Yeah.
The contractor usually are required because we want the soil testing after mass grading.
If there isn't any mass grading though, and the project is going to kind of leave the soil intact, then they should submit it when they submit their landscape documentation package up front, because they're using the soil that's there. It's when they're bringing it, so you can do it later. But yeah, there's if Soil and Plant Lab / Control Lab, both of those can provide, but there are a lot.
There are a number of
Yeah.
laboratories, especially in California.